All right, friends, I'm back with another episode of Charting the Future. This week, I thought it would be interesting. We had really great feedback from the podcast I did with Morgan from PCC and giving insight about ERX. Plus, people liked the fact that she made fun of me a little bit. And so I thought this week I would bring in two guests from PCC because we have, like you, been exploring is too light a word. We've been really digging deeply into AI and how it's going to affect our clients, not just from a charting perspective, but from everything. And we have I would say some uber nerds here. These aren't the only two, but they're good two reps for them. And we've learned a lot about AI. And I thought they might help us give some insight and maybe help you as pediatricians get an understanding of the promise and the danger of what AI will bring to us. By the time this podcast is out, something is going to hit your practice with it. You might not just know it yet. And so these two have been working on our integrated AI Scribe project. This isn't going to be a sales pitch, don't worry. But they're going to let you sort of peek behind the curtain and see what kind of challenges and problems that we've had while doing this, and what you might want to know as a pediatrician, maybe as you talk to your own vendor or as you help or as you vet a scribe tool for yourself. I don't know if I told you this, guys. I'll let them introduce themselves in a second. But when I was just at 2 weeks worth of conferences at Women in Pediatrics and at Pediatric CEO, there were multiple doctors in the room who just opened their laptop, turned on their AI Scribe for their EHR, and recorded each talk. And then they got a good summary of the talk. And they showed me, and I was like, yeah, that's so much better. Like if you can't, this is the other thing I saw at the conference. There are multiple talks going on. You can only pick one. People were taking their little AI brick, okay, they're things this big, and they hit play and they drop it in the back of the room and they go to one talk and then they come back and they get the full summary of the other talk. This is like Space 1999 for me. Anyway, I have here with me Scott Kirby and Brian LaClair. I'm going to ask you each to introduce yourselves and tell our audience what cool thing you do for PCC. So Scott, who are you? What do you do?
Hey, yeah, thanks. I'm Scott Kirby. I'm a longtime PCCer, I guess, not compared to you, Chip, but I've been around for a little over 10 years and in a variety of roles. But for most of that time and right now, I provide strategic and technical leadership for our clinical data exchange team, looking at interoperability products and features.
All right, cool. Brian, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, I'm Brian LaClair. I'm the baby of the group, apparently. I've only been at PCC for about 4 years. I started off here as an integration developer on Scott's team. So that's wiring up all the pipes that we need to send data from one place to the next. And now my position has swapped a little bit and I'm referred to as a special projects developer, which means that I get to focus on really cool new things like AI and a lot of other technologies.
I just realized if you multiply your time at PCC times your time at PCC, you get my time at PCC. All right. It's like we're talking about it like it's a prison. So I've been on death row for 37
We love
years.
it here.
Yeah, exactly. We love it here.
It's a prison with great
watch
food.
me blink SOS into the...
Yep.
So the reason I invited you guys here is because we're about to roll out an integrated AI Scribe, which is the thing that's the present that everyone has wanted to open for their birthday for the last 2 years. We have a lot of clients who've been using their own, and they're really eager to try ours out. And I'd love it. Of course, we haven't scripted any of this, so we'll see how well our mutual conversation goes. But I'd love it if we can share with the doctors what kind of things we've seen along the way from interviewing the third-party tools. Like, because if someone were doing it right, we would have just said, come on in. But we struggled there. And then what sort of struggles we've had building our tools and what you think is going to be happening in the future with those tools. I'm just going to let you two duke it out to see who has the most to say.
I think we can. I think there's a mutual beginning of this story of how PCC even came to looking at AI scribing in general.
Yep.
For a long time, I think as most people do feel, there was a lot of hesitation around generative AI tools in the, not even just in the practice, but in day-to-day life, right? And so for about a year or so, I think we all just kind of were getting our own grasp of the landscape. We saw these tools becoming more and more popular in the browser. So our clients were using them, some clients were using them. I think from what we saw, maybe a smaller percentage than in other segments of the medical landscape, but we could see that it was growing. And there were more and more practitioners that were asking us for some sort of guidance or integration for AI scribing. Um, and yeah, I mean, Scott, if you want to take it from there, as far as, we started in earnest looking at vendors or vendors that could help us even before May of last year. What was that initially like? Like, we talked to a lot of people.
We did,
Mhm.
yeah. And I remember both going to HIMSS, the sort of health IT conference, and talking to a lot of different AI scribe vendors who had sort of popped up as it became somewhat in vogue, and trying to get a sense of what unique elements, if any, the different vendors had, what specifically their value proposition was in terms of providing AI scribe functionality specific to healthcare in general, but pediatric specialty.
Mhm.
That was another thing we were looking for. We were really interested in concerns that I'm sure we'll speak to more in this conversation about privacy, sort of how data was handled in their pipelines, what the overall cost was and what their business models were, how that would, we generally like to keep costs low for our clients, and
Mhm.
would working with this or that outfit let us do that? And ease of integration, things like that. How much development work would we have to put into rigging up an integration with an existing scribe versus how much would it take for us to go direct to LLMs and build out the associated UI as well. So yeah, we went through a big checklist. We talked to a lot of the big names, and then we followed up after talking to some of them in person for more in-depth demos. And there were a lot of interesting ones. A lot of them have similar functionality, and some more relevant to pediatric specialty than others, some better for integration than others, and so on. But I think, and I'll pass this back to Brian, because I think this was something that really developed in his mind as we were going through the technical details. I think it became apparent to us after mucking around with some of the API and integration documentation, and indeed sandboxes for some of these
Yep.
products, that ultimately we were running into the problem of getting sort of fenced into their mode of interacting with the underlying technologies, and there was a certain inflexibility that seemed like it was going to come to us if we went the integration route, as opposed to building pipelines to the large language models and defining how our clients could interact with them through our product set itself, but keeping a flexible backend that we could kind of customize. And yeah, and I will kick that back over to Brian, because
Yeah.
that was really something
Mm.
that we talked about a lot, and he had strong ideas, and I think the right ideas about.
Yeah, and I think maybe strong feelings about in different regards too that I'll probably touch on. Like, uh, everybody is sick of everyone that we talk to. Every pediatrician that we talk to is sick of copying and pasting.
Yep.
So there were a bunch of vendors that we talked to that had zero interest in sort of our integrated vision of what an ambient scribe would look like in PCC EHR. So those were almost non-starters to us. We would be talking to these vendors that, their product would, as Scott's mentioning, more or less the same as the other ones we've looked at. There were people that would be somewhat flabbergasted at the idea that we even wanted to put it into the EHR directly. They were like, well, couldn't you just do it this other way? And we're like, no, like that. That's not good for anybody. As Scott was mentioning, the lock-in was pretty extreme as far as if we chose any vendor that we were looking at, they really wanted our clients to exist within their ecosystem, where PCC has no real assurance that their data is being treated responsibly and handled carefully. And that freaked us all out, I think, especially looking at some of the vendors out there that we see their long-term path as like building what we've already built, as far as having their own ecosystem that is an EHR adjacent product. Whereas for us, we want the best possible deal for our clients. And
Mhm.
so if we're going to invest in anything like that, we want it to be PCC EHR.
Right. And keep our clients. We don't want our clients to wake up someday and have all their data hijacked. Or now suddenly you got to pay twice as much to access it. Or we've seen all this stuff before. Now, you don't want to open the paper
Exactly.
and be like and see that there was a breach somewhere and say, wait a second, isn't that the company that I pay all this money to?
Or yeah, or even worse, isn't that the company that my doctor's office that I bring my kids to
Oh yeah, good
uses.
point.
Like, right?
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
its own extra level of insanity almost. So yeah, I mean, sorry, lost my train of thought. Sorry,
I'm
whoever's editing.
I know I'm the king of triggering that. I know that the first time I saw someone use it was literally, well, it must have been at least three NCEs ago. We had a client. It was one of my favorite clients, but he's since retired and his practice got bought by PE, so we're not even going to talk about the but he showed me, he had his phone and he said, yeah, this is what I do. I put the phone in and I do this recording. And at first I was like, what? This can't really work. Or like, how is this different from Dragon? Okay. It's just,
Right.
Yep.
and then you see it the first time, you're like, well, this is totally different from just transcription. Like it organizes it. It pressed me. But when I dug into it, and this is very much, I'm not going to name the vendor. This is very much one of the vendors. Not only did we talk to, but it was probably the most common vendor of everyone we spoke to. And
For
I would later
pediatric.
on,
Yeah.
yeah, in our space. And I was stunned by their disinterest in doing it what we perceive as the right way. And we were like, we can hand over a lot of pediatricians to you. You just have to work with us and protect the data. But I think that classic internet maximum, if the product is cheap, you're the product. And this is my fear. You guys tell me if my fear is exaggerated or unfounded. My fear is this: all of these AI vendors, it's a land grab. Okay, this is the gold rush. You're going to stake claims. And I predict within a year or two, some of these vendors will have enough input from doctors that's specialty specific. You're now going to get all of these AI vendors are going to come back fully branded for each specialty. All right. So, I almost named someone, but like this AI, which has been generally generic for the last 2 or 3 years, is going to come back with their specific pediatric version, which has been trained by hundreds or thousands of pediatricians, all of whom paid for that. All of them paid their own money to train this thing. And that's the whole purpose. The reason it's cheap relatively is because they are training these models. And then it also becomes a valuable product for other people who aren't taking chart notes. You want to start asking, you want to say, so what would a pediatrician say in this instance? How would a pediatrician think in that instance? If you're doing drug testing, or you want to release a product into the pediatric space, you have this language model that was taught by thousands of practice visits. You know what that's worth to a marketing team?
Probably a
Anyway,
lot.
that's my
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, like, I
Right.
try not to worry about that too much. There are certainly,
Yeah.
because you can drive yourself crazy with that
Right.
sort of thought process. There's certainly, one thing I will say is there certainly are more and more ambient scribe vendors popping up left and right, and many
Yep.
of them purport to have certain certifications that they probably don't have, which is
Really.
fascinating. A really, really fascinating thing to watch. And generally you only get that sort of commentary from the certain Reddit corners of the internet of
Yeah.
users bringing up, like, wait a minute, I've looked at this list and this company isn't on there. In fact, this company is not even registered as an LLC or anything like that. It's just some guy.
Yeah.
So
The
certainly,
certification
like,
came from their LLM creating the
Right.
website.
so certainly, like, if you aren't a PCC client, or you are a PCC client that's currently not using PCC Scribe, you want to stick to the vendors that you would kind of think of as far as that your colleagues have mentioned
Right.
in the past,
Right.
rather than kind of going off the beaten path and going onto Google and searching ambient scribe
Yep.
for pediatrics.
Brian, I did find a vendor that labeled themselves as an ambient scribe for pediatrics. And so I'm like, all right, what makes them pediatric? Did they put in all of the Bright Futures content? Is that none of that was there? None of that was there. And you couldn't find out who was behind the business. I emailed them to say, tell me about your pediatric specificity. And they're like, it works great for pediatricians. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
Does it?
And I don't think they exist anymore, but the
So
snake oil
that's,
in
I
this
think,
is
the big,
substantial.
and maybe Brian was about to say this as well, but in that list of sort of dangers about weird, sort of dodgy, various AI service providers, certainly
Yep.
Ambient Scribe, one of the big ones we considered early on was how many of these guys, once the sort of market thinning occurs, because like you said, it is a bit of a gold rush right now, once the different LLM costs change and sort of get to different points, especially considering the various energy issues that the world is facing right now. Not all of these companies are going to exist for the long haul, so to speak. And so, how do you really make informed decisions about partnering with one of them? I think that still remains to be seen. I think the landscape of ambient scribe providers is going to be very different
Yep.
in the next few years.
Yeah, I
Yep.
agree.
Yeah. So to bring it back
Yeah.
to kind of where I was going with all of this, you're currently listening to the attention deficit disorder podcast, I think, between the three of us.
That's
That's what makes
totally
us all
true.
fun. But as we were looking through these vendors, we kind of, at least I realized that it didn't seem like there was much of a special sauce. There's certainly nice to haves, as far as there are certain features like retrieval augmented generation or RAG, which allows us to look at things like Chip was mentioning, as far as like the bright futures information, or pull up these details at request rather than having it built into the large language model. But we would sit there with these scribe vendors and we would really dive in and ask them very directly, what foundational model are you using? And when you think of a foundational model, what that means is like the open AI chat GPTs of the world, or Anthropic Claude, or Google Gemini. Like, what are you using as the basis for your model, and do you fine tune it at all? And a lot of the answer that we found was, they would I think a little bit about
Yep.
answering those questions, but generally we would get the answer. Um, and oftentimes there wasn't much fine tuning going on. A lot of it was related to retrieval augmented generation, or just to really understanding what kind of prompt is going in to get the right output back for these like structured documents from a variety of sources. And so to us, when we were looking at, this is how much it would cost to integrate with this vendor, and then this is the cost that would be passed on to our clients. We don't control that cost at all,
Mhm.
or the billing is done through the third party. And then we can flip to the other side and say, okay, let's look at Chip and Scott know this. I spun up a prototype. I had a week off and I just spent some time just coding out what like my best approximation of an ambient scribe. And so once we
Wait,
had
what
that,
platform did you do that on
what
originally?
platform?
Yeah.
So that was built. It's not like our EHR. It's a web based platform. So it's kind
Yeah,
of
but
like,
did you do that on a little Raspberry Pi?
well, so I do have a Raspberry Pi off camera that's running a local large language model, but it
So
was
there you go.
essentially I'm a big nerd for these sorts of small large language models and open
Mhm.
source projects like that. But the original idea was, it's the idea of sending a patient's visit data anywhere outside of our systems,
Mhm.
which are generally on premises or client specific systems, is a terrifying proposition no matter what, for for the sake of privacy for the patient, for the sake of legality for the clinician. And so my initial vision was like, how much can we get away with here doing it all on just a laptop? How well can we do with no internet connection using an
Mhm.
open source large language model? The answer turns out to be pretty well. Like, thinking about how far to dive into this. Sorry, whoever added to.
Yeah, I already said the words Raspberry Pi. So 1% of
Yeah.
our audience is hooked.
Yeah. So yeah, we started looking at kind of the hardware limitations that we face among all of our clients, as far as like, most clients are using a laptop, but the
Mhm.
variety of hardware differences between those laptops
Shockingly.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
vast. So the hosting a large language model directly on their machine kind of quickly became out of the question. It is a very cool party trick for sure. But then we turned to like, okay, how much of this pipeline can PCC own and sort of ensure ourselves by doing our own auditing on it? And that's how we landed where we are, which is that we do all the transcription. PCC at a cloud level, we do all the transcription of the audio. We do all of the pre-processing of the transcript before it's actually turned into a generated, what we call a draft chart note. And then we work with a third-party LLM provider and use their models. And also, um, that's all I have to say. I can repeat that if you want.
No, but when you did your little experiment, I was so desperate for us to be able to have each practice host their own.
Yep.
We all understand why that's not possible. Or I will say why it's not possible
Well,
yet.
why it's not possible yet. Like I'll just jump in for a moment just to explain to the listeners. Like we experimented with what it would take for PCC to host our own foundational models. And really we're trying to align 3 different points of a triangle. There's the affordability, there's the quality, and then there's the security pieces. And we're trying to hit that
Usually
target.
2 of those legs are skipped at any given time.
Yes. Yep.
That's right.
Especially when we look at some of the big scribe vendors out there in the world, that some of those legs are skipped. But the optimal position is right in the center where you can kind of
Right.
match the expectations everywhere. With PCC doing our own foundational model, amazing security, amazing quality, but the affordability is just not there because we can't send it
in
today.
2026.
Yeah. So we wanted to chart, we wanted to look towards the future, if you will, and kind of say, how do we set ourselves up for a future where we can come back to this idea without sacrificing security, quality, and affordability right now?
And if we were to lock in to some third-party candidate, we would then be dependent on our API relationship, their prompting, all of the stuff on the backside. And when the world RAM crisis resolves or whatever's going to happen and the prices come down, everyone gets an NVIDIA card or whatever. Then that gives us the opportunity to make everyone self-hosted, which is
Really
the dream of
cool.
every open source nerd on the planet. That just is. So that's interesting. Now, once we decided that, okay, here's the framework for what we're going to do, I'm curious what kind of, if you had any surprises about, okay, we want to implement this, but what kind of things are we now learning about pediatric workflow? Or what did you not understand that what did you not understand that now makes you an expert because you do?
That's a great
No
question,
pressure.
Chip. I know everything. No, I think the thing to me that was, that we've, I think, come to accept and really embrace is, I'll just give this anecdote here. The way that we validated this approach was by launching that web platform that I described. So this prototype web platform, doctors who use PCC EHR to use this platform and test it out, and they did something that we thought was awesome, but didn't ask them to do directly, which is testing it while also using the ambient scribe that they're usually using. Yeah, so we actually we decided not to give them that instruction. We thought it would be cool, but many of them started doing it that way, and then ended up using our scribe most of the time, or just using it occasionally, but saying, "Oh, I like this and this better from the PCC scribe," or like, "Actually, I'm using the PCC scribe 100% of the time now because it's just perfect for me." But the thing that I learned immediately was I set up this like beautiful default SOAP note template where I was like, "Oh, this is perfect. This seems like this is going to work great for the doctors that are going to use this." And immediately I was proven wrong of what sections they wanted, what instructions they wanted. And I think that's what we've all learned on the team, is to lean into the customizability of the templates.
Yeah.
And really just lean on actual clinicians who are doing this work to drive like what our expectations are for these templates, and what they actually want to see. And we've also learned the quality of the output of these draft chart notes in any scribe is completely subjective. One clinician could see, or 2 clinicians could see the same exact note from the same exact visit, and one would say, "Oh, this is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted." And another one could say, "Well, I want this language to be more clinical here and less clinical there," or, I wanted this in a bulleted list. So it's really all about making sure that there is a decent amount of customizability for the user to do. And I think that's something that we've nailed with PCC Scribe, where it's like, if you don't like something, you can change it. And even more powerful, you can change it while you're generating the note. You can generate the note multiple times from one visit and just sit there and really configure and dive into your templates and make sure that it is working exactly the way you want it to.
I think one of the things that the AI Scribe process is underscoring for our entire community is that there isn't a single target for any section of the note. We know this because Brian, you said an AI Scribe generated note might work really well for one physician and not as well for another. I'm just going to say a physician created note works really well. It's not it's not the AI. It's not the scribe. It's that you all, and I'm looking right in the camera at you all, have such very different ways and needs for how you want to see your information. That one seemed it's so obvious in retrospect, but it did catch me by surprise. I mean, it's just so obvious. I just meant I never thought past what happens after I'm done talking, because I never think about that. The it it creates, like, what comes out is totally dependent on what you've told it to do. And at the end, this is so true of so many parts of every EHR. I don't want to say the easy part is creating the technical pieces. It's just that that's the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's configuring it all so it fits. There are days I wake up and I wish we didn't give our clients so many options. I wish we just told everyone, like, this is how you're going to chart. We wouldn't sell anything, but the ones who had it would love it, because it would be like, we'd be 5 years ahead of where we are, because we don't have to slow down and, like, consider the user. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm right. I'm gonna see if I'm not supposed to ever ask questions where people don't know the answer, but I'll ask a question right now. You know, we've had a decent number of our clients playing with this already, and they've been working on the prompts. And I mean, we're not fools. We choose clients who we know are, like, nerdy like we are, and are going to use it and leverage it. What are some of the surprising things you've seen our clients do that you're allowed to say? I can think of at least one or two things that I know our clients went and did where we're like, stop doing that. Like, get back asking it to do your coding. All right, we're not going to talk about that. But what were some surprising things that you saw that clients figured out on their own that weren't on your radar right away?
Oh, I mean, you took one off the table that definitely.
Yeah,
I
we're not
think,
talking about that one
yeah,
yet.
yet. I think, we have one client in particular who was actually the first to see the prototype at the PCC users conference last year. And they really liked, they had the Scribe tool that they use most of the time allows them to generate, like, letters and documents from their Scribe session, which is certainly something that we, look towards in the future. But with the original web tool, that was a possibility, as far as you can set up templates that make this possible from the input text, and you can add certain input text in a notepad feature, which is something that's made it over into the integrated version in the EHR. So I think that surprised me a lot. Essentially, they were so keen on being able to do that they brute forced the tool to be able to do it. That was cool. I think something that we've learned in tandem with the clients that we thought was really interesting is just how powerful, we had some concerns back and forth about exactly how we were doing the templating. You see in a variety of tools, like, the setting up templates is very different depending on what you're looking at. It could be a bunch of checkboxes. It could be, like, drop down selections of, like, kind of the style that you want. What we did for the prototype version and then continued on with in the integrated version is you have a text box. You get to very explicitly, or as least, you could leave it blank and it'll do a pretty good job most of the time, but you get to describe exactly what you want, or you can sit there and you can lay out a format of what you want. So if you want something very structured, you can, in each section of your template, you can sit there and say, oh, when this happens, say this word in this spot, but if that doesn't happen, put this other word instead. And you can really build out some really incredible things. What we learned from having kind of this free form interaction was LLMs in general are very good at building that kind of template. So we talk a lot about, you were kind of discussing it with, or touching on it with the, I wish we could just build whatever we want. But the feedback loop is really important between us as developers and the user, like understanding what the user needs to get out of it. And if we've gotten something right or wrong, or like how we can slightly adjust something to make it way better. The same is true between the clinician and their ambient scribe, especially in our case, where, I was alluding to the power of being able to regenerate your note multiple times. You might sit there and say, okay, here's, like, the original draft chart note that PCC Scribe has come up with. I'm going to, there's nothing identifying in this information. I'm going to put it into another LLM and say, like, or I'm going to adjust it to exactly how I want it to be, put it into another LLM and say, can you help me make a template that does exactly this? Like, here's the exact output, or here's the exact information that I have in my template right now. Here's what it came out with from this visit. Of course, any identifying information removed from that, or even further than that, you can just describe what's wrong. And then LLMs are very good at generating that template back. And so that's something that our clinicians working with figured out pretty quickly. And then
That's
we were able
that's a
to really
really cool
leverage.
idea. How do I
Yeah.
make, and just for the non-nerdy among us, what seems like a very complicated thing is not. It's just that our AI tool doesn't have a prompt like ChatGPT and Gemini. So people are taking the output of our AI tool, putting it into a prompt, saying, make it cooler, make it, what would I have to ask it to do this? And then you put that back in the instructions that we provide. All right, ready? This is the world's worst idea. I might remove this from the podcast. Have you guys ever played a prank on someone? Like you grab their iPhone and you do the text substitution stuff,
Yep.
so that
Oh,
every
yeah.
time someone
Yes.
types yes, it says no. You could go into someone's AI configuration and add a bunch of stuff to the prompt so that it
Don't.
always says
I
I
I'm
feel like we
already
used to
thinking.
do that with bash aliases when it was
yes.
earlier PCC days.
That's
Don't
why
give
do
them
I
any
just always
ideas,
go to
Chip.
it? Yes. Yeah. That's just what you know. What that's a lesson. You still have to review your notes before you
Yeah.
hit.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
that's exactly why we call it the draft chart note. This was another thing where a lot of the vendors that we spoke to external to PCC were like,
Yeah.
"Oh, it comes out perfect every time." What you
No,
need to,
No such
it
thing.
does
No, it
not.
doesn't.
Yeah.
And what you need to know as a medical professional is that as soon as this is in your chart, it is your words, right?
Right.
Like from a
Right.
legal perspective, this is a tool that is assisting you. And so we have really thought, I believe, and from all the feedback we've received so far, really thoughtfully designed the process of, okay, here's your draft chart note. Like,
Mhm.
we're not sitting there being like, are you sure you reviewed it? But there's just enough friction in that process of
Yep.
inserting it into your chart where we really want you to read through it and make sure it represents your words appropriately. Because the worst
Uh,
thing that
uh,
could possibly happen with any of these tools, and we know this is already happening out in the wild, is
yeah.
people going on autopilot and just assuming, like, yes, it's fine.
Yes.
Especially for notes that, or like sections of notes that the patient may see, to have that reaction of, I didn't say that in the visit,
That's
or
not what
like,
I
I
said.
didn't
Right.
express that at all. That's a really great way to break the trust between the patient and the clinician.
Brian, you just said something that I want the listeners to hear, because I don't think the people who end up having to use our software, anyone's software, understand this. So you just said, like, we tried to strike a balance between making it really easy and fast and having just enough friction to slow them down and have them pause and consider, make sure that what's in there is right. And that's something I want you to hear. I'm not saying this in defense of all EHR vendors, okay? People have heard me say this plenty of times. We sell sadness. That's our business. We just want to sell you as little sadness as possible. So many times, what do I hear? I just heard it at the conferences this week. Oh, it's too many clicks to do this. I got to get my staff to fix this because when they do this wrong, I've got 3 clicks. And some portion of those clicks, even for the mediocre vendors, are to slow you down. Some of those clicks are actually not because the EHR is poorly designed. It's that because you as the user are going to, without them, without those signs or those signals, those speed bump ahead elements, without those things there, you just, because you're human, click through so much so fast that garbage gets in there. We know that we've seen this so many times. That's why when you close a window on every operating system there is, it will say, are you sure? And, the power users, because I would always turn that off. Yeah, I'm clicking it because I'm sure. And 4 times a year, I nuke a window that I wish I hadn't, or whatever.
Yep.
Like, that's just, and so we build some of those things in. And it's just how and where we decide to do it. Well, that's the PCC flavor. Other people have other flavors.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, to that point, you hear a lot more about the debate of sort of AI in the loop versus human in the loop. This is getting into the weeds a
Yep.
little bit at this
Yep.
point, but I think healthcare, anything where there's significant trust and patient safety concerns and security, this is a place in which
Yep.
the human touch is going to continue to be needed and is a critical part
Yeah.
of how we
Right.
deploy solutions like this one. But I think is going to be kind of a guiding principle in how we approach, whatever next frontiers we get into with AI assisted tooling, especially as you look at some of the more agentic workflows, various sort of next steps that we might look into. This is kind of, a guiding paradigm, I think, that we'll have to
Yeah.
keep centered.
You just opened Pandora's box, Scott. So I'm gonna call an audible, which I'm now mixing sports references and Raspberry Pi references in the same podcast. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna say thank you to you guys, but this isn't the end. We're gonna keep talking in a minute, or as we go past me here in a second, because I want to now get into the agentic stuff and how that's going to affect us. I think physicians are really going to need to understand what this means for us in the future. But that's now we're way off course for the podcast. We'll prop that up somewhere else. But I'm just going to say thank you to you two for coming to the podcast. I hope this was enlightening to someone. We certainly welcome questions and comments about AI and a scribe. I mean, and this very razor specific utilization of AI in your practices. And we're going to now slide into something even nerdier. So at some point, if you're listening right now and you want to keep going with the nerdier stuff, it'll be on our social media. I'll put a link to it in the blog even. Because Scott, you have to explain something. I know what it is because I am a dork, but I was just at a conference where I saw a really good AI presenter. This is pediatric. It was a neonatologist. Of course, it's pediatric neonatologist who's been using AI for all kinds of functionality in his practice. And he started talking about agentic, and a hand went up immediately. And someone said, what does that mean? And he gave a good explanation, but maybe we can give an explanation that even means something more to the users. So have at it. What is agentic AI, Scott?
Ooh, it's a big
No pressure.
You'd probably do
No
better
pressure.
to get the AI summary out of your web browser. But I mean, generally speaking, agentic in that they have an agency, unlike just simply interacting with a large language model or something, insofar as they can interact with other applications, plan actions, take actions, set up different kinds of structures and work with systems to really do things. And that has kind of profound implications in how folks can wield these tool sets, both in terms of, certainly the promises of efficiency and automation and sort of, intelligent task offloading, but also, the sort of the double-edged sword of the implications there of, AI processes potentially running amok and taking significant actions in various applications and databases and so on. So it's an interesting field, and there's a lot there. Brian's thought a lot about it as well. I'm sure he's got more to say.
Yeah, I generally like to start by demystifying the term agentic, right? Like, and so Scott's explanation was good. What I like to do is say agentic AI is generative AI that can use tools. And what tools are is it's literally an interaction between a large language model and its underlying system. So when you go to let's say you open up Google Gemini in your browser and you're talking to it and you say, oh, like what's Chip Hart been up to lately? When it performs that action of doing a Google search for who the heck is Chip Hart anyway, that's a tool use call. So essentially it's saying it's a large language model that has been trained to be able to put a template out that says, hey, I have this list of tools. One of them is using Google search. I'm going to use the Google search tool to search for this specific string of text. And there can be a bunch of different parameters that are associated with those tools. Tool usage can even be of other large language models or the same large language model in a different kind of instance of a chat, right? So it could be, I have some agentic systems set up at home with my, as the aforementioned Raspberry Pi small large language model thing. And essentially what it does is like I have like, checking the weather and doing Google searches and writing files to a specific file system. As Scott was mentioning, this is some of the more potentially nefarious or potentially dangerous sort of stuff you can do. When we talk about agentic workflows as it relates to kind of your software that you're using in your pediatric practice, there's a lot of different ways that could, or things that could look like. Like, I'll just keep it on the scribe for a moment. Something that people are going to want to see. Just going to put myself into the future a few months here. Something that people are going to want to see with our system is the ability to maybe suggest orders that need to be opened from the scribe window. So the scribe window in PCC EHR is not ever present, but it might be nice if after the visit it says, hey, you mentioned this, and this.
Yeah, when I see a kid with these things, the literature, here's my citation, says maybe you ought to test for this.
And here's a quick little button that you can press that opens this order in your EHR, right? Like
Yep.
that's a really simple.
I'm convinced, Brian, by the way, if we can find the balance on that is helping pediatricians become better doctors without saying at the end of every visit, here are 45 things you forgot to do.
Yep.
We're not going to do that. But if we can
This is
find
the
that balance,
terrifying one.
yeah, I think that is going to have such a profound impact on our clients, and they're eager. Most of them are very eager for it because
Yep.
they like lose sleep at night saying, "Oh, did I forget something? Did I not see something?" And if you just have a little buddy who has all of medical literature in his head sitting over your shoulder and can maybe guide you
Yeah.
to a better outcome for a kid, people are going to love that.
But it even goes as deep as like, a few 10 years ago. Wow. I'm just going to feel old for a moment, even though I am still the youngest among us.
Yep.
When we first started seeing things like Amazon Alexa and Google Home and all these little assistants, like that's, I think, what a lot of people think of when they talk about agentic AI,
Yep.
being able to sit there and say, hey, I want you to perform this action that takes multiple steps for me to click around and do a thing. But I want you to go and do that in the background. Like, I think that's where I think that's
Yep.
a very valuable way to look at what might
Yep.
be in the future. Will it actually, I mean, as Chip mentions, like there's a downside to all of this where it can go overboard. It can, there should be reasonable controls to make sure that your automated systems that are interacting with something like agentic AI are doing what they're supposed to do and not,
Right.
not deleting a patient's records just because it felt like it.
Right.
Obviously, these are controls that we build in at the software level rather than a large language model level.
Or even just obstructing your workflow when they're meant to introduce efficiencies. I mean, I think Chip's point about it popping up a million things at the end of a visit.
Right.
You can easily imagine, wielding this stuff incorrectly and using however much processing power to get all the way back to Clippy and being like,
Right.
oh, okay, great.
Well, everyone who works for a large healthcare system or a hospital and their lawyers are going to come in and say, you need to jump through 5,000 hoops to get through this day. The productivity is going to drop. The autonomy is going to drop. However, if you are in an independent space and you can use this tool to get better, spend more time on more important things and less time on less important things, I think that's going to have a huge impact. All of the first time I understood the concept of agentic, I was like, until I can ask AI to mow my lawn, it's really not using the tools I want it to use. But when this is going to sound slightly scary, but not exaggerated. At the conference I was just at, one of the doctors, as an aside, said, we have a couple agentic tools that we use to post charges, confirm diagnoses, do my coding, do denials. And I'm sitting there in the room going, uh-oh.
Yeah. Well, that was, I'll just bring up, like, when we looked at what the version of the PCC Scribe was that we wanted to ship in this upcoming version of PCC EHR, we very specifically denoted that we, at least for now, we don't want it to make any clinical decisions, right? And I think that's generally how we feel in the long run at PCC is, we want the people that have actually been to medical school and are practicing pediatricians to be making the decisions. Like, we think that is the morally correct thing. We think that is the safest way to operate. And I think the same kind of thought process comes down to what you were just mentioning. And I think what we've kind of been talking about, like anything that relates to generative AI should be looked at as a helpful tool and not something that is just driving everything.
Right.
I know.
Yeah, because then we're going to have robot wars, and it's going to be like, the winner will be the one with the most electric power. The person closest to the dam is going to win the robot wars. That's whose claim is going to get through and get paid. That's the way I see it.
Well, I was going to say that, I mean, even when I think some of the most interesting things, and it seems like a lot of the large LLM companies or the large LLM providers have really started coming around to, generative AI works really well for business needs. And I think we've seen a lot of enterprising pediatricians using large language models for coding assistance, for computer coding assistance, not necessarily for billing coding assistance. But I think that's one of the spots where things feel a little bit more perhaps on rails / safe for,
Right.
if you need a tool that, maybe you want to show PCC what you want, or maybe you just need something that works for you for your business needs as a practice owner. Generative AI seems great for that. And that's, I think, a good highlighting of, where it fits in as a tool rather than something that's driving your entire life. You get to be the master of your future and build whatever you think you need for your business operations, which is awesome. I think that's
Right. Well,
really
but
powerful.
I'm going to ask you a scary question.
Yeah.
Because this is the pressure that I think we and our customers are up against. So right now, staffing is the number one expense of almost every pediatric practice. I read a lot of P&Ls. So staffing is in the neighborhood of 25 to 35% of the revenue that everyone brings in goes out the door to front desk, back office staff, and so forth. And depending on and maintaining that staff is getting increasingly difficult. Our clients are reporting everywhere, can't find front desk staff, can't find billers. Okay. I mean, billing services have two fundamental jobs: be good at billing, hire employees. That's what they're taking off your plate. So what I'm wondering is, okay, I'm a busy pediatrician, biting my nails every night, making sure I can make payroll. And what if someone came along and said, well, you don't have to make payroll for a third or less of what you pay your billers. I'm not a billing service, but we know your EHR, right? We've already done this before with your EHR. You just give us a login, and my agent is going to log in, look at the chart note, tell you what the CPTs and ICD, or determine what the CPTs and ICDs are going to be. They're going to post them for you. They're going to send those claims. And of course, we're aware of the million pieces in between that could go wrong. Okay. But people are already tuning their software for this. And so part of me says, should a vendor like us be thinking about how to design our software to be easier for an agentic AI model as opposed to having it integrated per se? And is that even a possibility? That was my scary thought this weekend. Someone's going to say something.
There's a lot in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of like two big intakes of breath.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
I mean,
all right. Okay.
So one thing I will say is, regardless of the specific application, there's a lot to say about the claim submission side of things and about sort of regulatory or various policies that are starting to develop now, sort of demanding proof of human review on either side of the fence to avoid those kinds of AI wars that you're talking about.
Yep.
And I think we're going to continue to see that kind of shift. But in general, I do think it makes sense sort of strategically to prioritize making sort of AI-friendly development around the products you put out themselves, whether that's defining APIs into your data sources that, that agentic or otherwise AI systems can interact with simply. And that, to Brian's point, for folks who are using, development assistant functionality through large language models, that they can easily point those models at and get easy development tooling out of. Because, the more effectively defined a data source is, the more easy it is for, whatever LLM you point at it to write some code for it and figure out, how you want to interact with it. So I do think in general, there's a lot to think about there. And yes, you do want to kind of imagine how you would see AIs interacting with your data sources.
And I think, to Scott's point, like the kind of the API discussion / also there's another thing that floats around called the model context protocol, which we're seeing kind of die out and in favor for normal human facing APIs. That's the key way of interacting with software that, vendors can maintain security. They can say, okay, here are the guardrails. You, Joe Schmo, can go on and, whichever vendor they're talking to that provides a service like that can actually access the data safely. Whereas right now, I think a lot of the stuff that we are seeing is somewhat, I think, is most concerning to Scott and I, because a lot of it is like screen reading technology, like literally taking screenshots and clicking or like moving a mouse around the screen to operate effectively, which I think as developers, we're just like, no, don't do that. Like that is such a bad way to do it. It's so inefficient.
But well, no, it's super efficient. It's just not super effective.
Correct.
It's efficient because you can crank up a machine and 2 hours later it can post a payment most of the time, accurately. And that is my point is that is a bug zapper that a moth will fly to, especially in an industry that is already, in my opinion, has a problem with offshoring a tremendous amount of work. And this is not a big difference between offshoring and having the computer do it. It's just you don't feel as bad underpaying someone in another country.
I mean, to get back to your kind of initial question about this of like, is it a good idea?
Right.
I would say it depends. I would say it depends on this. I'm going to pull out a chip line right here.
That's why I'm laughing. I'm like, well, yeah.
Well, I'm going to say I think it depends on the type of contract that you sign with the vendor. Because
good point. Yeah.
Just thinking back to like our Scribe conversation, looking at these vendors, like I think we all know collectively as a society, essentially there's a hammer floating over all of generative AI stuff, which is, or I guess a bomb of, when is the pricing bomb going to drop? Like when are prices going to change on token generation? And what we see from the third party vendors and a lot of the drive of like why we were like, okay, let's, take this on ourselves and build our own platform. And there's actually more to say on this. So I'm sorry it's not in the main part of the podcast. It's like we know how much potentially the cost could go up from our third party provider. We do not know, especially because there's already significant margins that the vendor, like the prices that you pay to any other Scribe vendor, the margins are significant. And so we don't know what, the price could go up 30 cents per million tokens. And they might say, oh, now it's actually going to be 2 times the price for you to use our service, but you're locked in for a year. So cool. Like glad you're going to pay us that much more money. So that's what scares me. Like I think there's obviously in a lot of areas like this, I think there's proven technology that is working right now.
Yes.
So I think the trick is to not put your eggs all in one basket. And that's been the PCC approach to all of our AI stuff so far is, okay, we're building the pipelines for the Scribe right now. But also we're looking towards the future of, and this was a big concern when we were building the Scribe or looking at vendors for the Scribe was, okay, cool. We've gone through this whole build buy process for the Scribe and we've found a third party Scribe vendor that we like and, we're working with them. Now what happens when we're looking at a different agentic feature or a different, a completely different area?
A cooler Scribe comes along. AAP says, here's a free pediatric Scribe. We would be the first in line for that. And then we're locked in.
Yep. Or and then on the flip side, it's like for us that was the consideration with with our thing, but like that's a consideration that should be in every practice owner's mind is where when the hammer drops, how flexible am I to actually like move the change? Yeah.
Yep. I'll say one of the most powerful strategic things that PCC ever did, and I want to be clear, we've never leveraged it fully. And we didn't know we were doing it, which is also classic PCC, is that when we didn't even decide to do it, just happened. But when we became our own clearinghouse, I take for granted that everyone else has full control over the flow of their clients. When I meet, how long I've been doing this, I still get surprised when I meet a practice and they're like, oh, my third party clearinghouse, and there are 2 or 3 of them who most people use at this point, but there used to be a half dozen. And they're like, I got to log into that clearinghouse site. I got to manage all my claims over there. I don't like them. Like, believe me, if you love your clearinghouse, someone hates it. And if you hate your clearinghouse, someone loves it. I mean, it's just, you get every flavor. And the fact that we're beholden to no one is such a relief for us. Like when Change Healthcare hit, we got to reroute all of those claims around the problem. Now, could we control that half the money coming back was stuck because the payers on the other side were locked into Change Healthcare? No, we can't fix that. But because they not think ahead and they said we're gonna be exclusive with this vendor, and that flexibility that's paid off for us. And I expect, in fact, that this cycle on this will be 12 months. 24 months before we really are like, thank God we did it that way.
Yeah.
Thank God we didn't just partner with these guys over here
Well, we've
to be AI,
yeah, to be clear, there are vendors that we looked at working with who are no longer in business.
Exist. Yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah, that way,
And some of the ones with better functionality.
Yeah.
right?
So it was, I mean,
Yeah.
like, all throughout this process over the last year of building this feature, it's just been confirmation upon confirmation of like, oh, okay, we're moving in the right direction because
Right.
we have already accounted for these potential issues.
Yep.
Which I think is
No,
amazing.
yeah, I think lesson learned there. All right. Well, the three of us could talk about this for hours, especially I just want everyone listening to understand how hard we worked not to bring in guitar solos into this conversation or something like that with the three of us would have talked about for an hour alone. And Brian probably has a guitar within like 10 feet of him.
There's one
Oh,
hanging
there
on
it
the
is.
wall back
Oh, yeah.
there.
Like it's a little bit thing. I know Scott doesn't because I know where he's sitting, and I moved mine up to my camp. But we could have all, I'm going to bring this back for a second. We could have all gone down that rabbit hole easily. I did a week ago find myself unable to stop listening to one of the AI artists
Oh my
on.
gosh.
No,
Yeah, and
It's
I
a
was
whole
it was
different subject.
for two reasons. Number one, I actually kind of liked it, and I was like, it was just the stuff was streaming in the background. I was like, oh, this is pretty good. I wonder what like that's pretty much like mature sounding. This I've never heard of this band before, and where are they getting this huge sound? Well, they clearly copied it,
GPUs,
right?
GPUs.
Yeah, exactly. But then I couldn't stop listening because I'm like, what is the magic formula on every one of these songs that is pressing my button? It is, I'm being served a Big Mac, okay?
Yep.
Like I know it, and I couldn't stop listening. It freaked me out a little bit. Yeah, scary times are coming.
I did have an instance of hearing a song on an algorithmic, playlist on like my regular streaming app that I was listening to in the car, where about a minute in, I was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
This is a robot.
Something sounds too something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I took a screenshot of the page on my phone and then fast forwarded to the next track and did some research once I was sitting in a non-vehicle environment.
Yeah, and what did you learn?
Well, I mean, it was just completely computer generated. I think there are a ton of platforms that are doing this sort of thing. I think the primary one, I'm not even going to name any names, but
Yeah.
as a musician, it's not terribly like I'm not concerned from like a perspective of like getting paid or making money or whatever.
Because we don't make any money anyway.
Yeah, I'm broke. But no, I think from a moral perspective, it feels weird.
Mhm.
It's not particularly good. Like you mentioned, it's kind of the digital. You used Big Mac, which I think was a good analogy there. It's very addictive and like hits all the right buttons for you.
And then you don't feel good after.
You don't feel good after, and all of them sound the same. There are certain clues as to, I see this with AI imagery as well. There are certain like patterns that you can recognize as far as
very
like
much.
texturing, and the same thing exists in the vocals of AI music tracks. All of them sound a little bit tinny in the vocals.
So that's where you hear it in the vocals.
Yeah, there's this little bit of crunchiness that you wouldn't expect otherwise. I think one of the most concerning things to me is I see, especially older friends, posting like AI music tracks that they've made, and they're like, "This is my song that I made," and I was like, "No, you got to struggle." Like it's a little bit of gatekeepering.
No, that's true. The thing that gets me is the access now to make music has been eliminated. And so the other day, one of my brothers sent my whole family the chart notes of his ankle exam. Okay. Cause he's got to get maybe like an ankle replacement or something crazy. And it's just all this, it sounds like a Cannibal Corpse album. Like it's got all these lyrics, I mean, I can pull it up, but it's like all this really hyper technical medical jargon. So I just took it and dropped it into an AI thing, and I said, make it a death metal thing. And it was, and the thing is, you listen to it, you're like, there's no way 10 years ago that album wouldn't have sold to the people who listen to that music, because it's funny. But I couldn't have, without weeks of effort, done anything remotely close on my own. I did it in 10 minutes on my couch. And that part that's addictive. That's addictive. Don't worry, I only did it once, Brian. You don't have
Oh,
to
good.
intervene. You don't have to
That
intervene.
track you heard, Brian, Chip produced that. You didn't know.
Yeah, that's right. But that's, well, the analogy here is that, let me see if I can connect these two thoughts. For 20 years in our business, what we've heard about are, I'll pick on them because they're not, what are they going to do? Come get me. Everyone here knows about the Epic chart note. And it's Epic with a lowercase e and Epic with an uppercase e. It's 30 pages for a well visit. And our clients have complained about this forever. They get a whole set of charts for someone in a Epic driven healthcare system, and a chart note can be 250 pages. And it really hurt back when everything was faxed, and our clients they would lose a ream of paper a day on 2 kids. And I think that one of the reasons that exists is what I think of as healthcare inflation. Like the cost to the person making the note of adding all this additional stuff is so little. It's only on the receiving end that it hurts. And I feel like the cost of making either really polished notes or really extensive notes or adding a tremendous amount of content to a chart note the cost is about to plummet, because right now a doctor has to go through and say, yes, no, check, maybe type something. Okay. Every vendor has their version of what we call snap text, smart phrases for Epic people. All right. But every vendor has that. And some people use it really cleverly, but they have to build their own. They have to type it once. But hey, if you're now be able to say, I did a Bright Futures well visit for a kid, which I did that on stage at PMI 2 years ago. I said, without knowing what was going to happen, and 2 years ago, that's 1,000 years ago in the AI space. And I said, write a chart note for me for a normal visit for a 9-year-old boy using Bright Futures protocols. Everything's normal. And what it spat out was better in terms of completion than so many of the chart notes I see. And it was that being able to spew out stuff that may not actually represent what happened in the room.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going with this. Like the AI is going to make it so easy to make an irrefutable chart note that the payers are going to come and figure out a new way to do it that is way more painful.
Yep.
I don't know what that is yet, but I fear that.
I know we've seen this. I think I'm not even going to mention any specific projects at PCC, but if you've ever taken like a large data set, not even medically focused, but something business focused, let's say just a bunch of,
claims, the claim volume.
I mean, we'll use claims as an example. I haven't personally done that, but if you look at something and you say, this is going to take a really long time to review, and you just throw it into a generative LLM and it spits out a summary for you, how do you know that that summary is legitimate?
Right,
and there have been times that, I have said, okay, like I see all of this information that I have in front of me. Let me just see what Gemini or OpenAI puts out for me. And then I will sit there and hand validate what it said. And it is surprising how often it is wrong. Or how often it just doesn't account for certain things.
For certain things. And I'll add, there's an insidious element, because it's surprising how often it's 90% right. And then there's a glaring or critical omission or addition that really bears review. Anyway, sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, you're okay. I'm
gonna say this. You know what scares me? I've seen, because you guys know what work I do here. I've been seeing a bunch of tools lately for doing practice analysis. I was just at a conference where I saw in development, and it's really cool, pediatric specific tool that you can drop your P&L and your balance sheet into it, and it will give you pediatric feedback and make you a nice dashboard. I worked on one myself where you can drop all your vaccine data into it, and it will tell you you're getting paid too little for this, your admins are not right there. All those things are true. I like, this stuff is coming, and it's fun as hell. Maybe it just is. All of a sudden, is anyone here a really good graphic designer? No, but I am now.
No. That's one I do offload pretty.
Yeah. But here's my fear. Not a big glaring error, but a little one.
Yeah.
5% error. One that you do not see. And the only time you see it is when you build that stuff by hand.
Yeah. Yep.
And then when you build it by hand and you find your own 5% error, you pull a thread, and not only do you fix the error, you find some other insight that you weren't aware of. Those are the ones that would catch me. PCC, these two know because they suffer through it. We go through massive testing. Why does PCC not release duds. Why do you never hear a PCC client complain about our latest release? They just don't, because we work twice as hard making sure that we don't send out duds. It's hard to catch that stuff in testing.
Yep.
It's hard to catch the exceptions. Yeah, oh, whoops, decimal point off. We find that quickly. And I'm afraid, like I'm going to tell you right now, within 3 months, I think some of our direct competitors are going to have entirely new dashboard tools that make ours look prehistoric. And just because we're not idiots, PCC already has one in-house. Okay, we have stuff that knock your socks off, but we are slow because it needs to be right. And people are going to come to us and say, your dashboard doesn't do X, Y, and Z. And I'm just going to say, there is no human way they tested that.
Yep.
If they, to do it right, there's no way that cause you can't do it without doing it by hand. And what I would compare it to, because I'm the king of bad metaphors, you don't know how to play guitar till you know how to tune your guitar. Tuning your guitar is like, you don't hear it when it's wrong. And you don't hear when someone does something interesting unless you know how to tune your guitar.
Yep.
Like tuning your guitars, if I ever and I'm saying all this, these two guys play 1,000 million times better than I do, okay? But when I talk to friends who are learning to play, I just tell them, learn to tune your guitar, because it changes the whole way you see the instrument. It's the same thing. And if everyone's just handing you a tuned guitar all the time, all right, it's tricky. You got to be like Eddie Van Halen, who made his own neck guitar tuner. That's why he was a god. He wants drop D in the middle of a song. He could be drop D in the middle of a song. That's awesome.
I don't know if we have a good way to link in. I just want to, there was an opportunity here. If there's a way to link into our, podcast description, certain links, but I wanted to make sure the audience and you two were aware of my favorite article that relates to this topic, which is it's an article called "It Took Many Years and Billions of Dollars, but Microsoft Finally Invented a Calculator That Is Wrong Sometimes" by Barry Petchesky. And it's all about exactly the topic that we're discussing right now. This article came out in, I think, August 20th, 2025. Not much has changed since there from the underlying technology that is generative LLM.
Right.
Not much has changed other than efficiency and size regarding generative LLMs since 2023. There have been minor advancements here and there, but a lot of it is all about the integrations occurring within the whatever given vendor's suite. But yeah, it's really about this subject of like, oh, if you put a spreadsheet through an LLM, if you squint, everything looks fine. But if you really, these are still ever present, and dare I say, and this is somebody come back and clip this part of the podcast at some point in the future when I'm wrong, it might become less present. But with the way that large language models specifically work, I don't believe this is ever a problem that's going to be solved completely.
I agree. And I also agree because not simply because the technology will never get where it needs to be, but because humans are imperfect. And your whole, I think you said it exactly right. This spreadsheet looks great if you squint at it, because what is the processing of a human brain, the whole Malcolm Gladwell blink concept of just being able to see and hear something and know it's not right intuitively, but not know, because our processor still is unmatchable. We're just not good at we know something doesn't feel right or smell right, and that's what kept us alive, but I think it's always going to be a problem. But when your new friend can do all the hard work faster and make it look on the surface better, it's addictive.
Yep.
It really is. And to Brian's point, I mean, I think what remains to be seen is how our relationship to this tooling evolves, right? It's a question about what spaces we find it valid in, what the right balance is between human cognition and oversight and sort of thoughtful wielding of these models is, and what they can sort of do efficiently, and what the tightrope you're walking there is. There's this perception that things are just going to continue to, at a technological level, evolve in this sort of exponential way. But certainly, that's debatable, if not settled as incorrect as far as the actual sort of model development themselves. There's a lot of folks think that there's a significant plateau, if not diminishing returns there at some point. You've sort of gotten from a scalability standpoint, as good as we're going to get for the foreseeable future in terms of what the models are turning out. And it's really more about what we do with these technologies, where we do allow them to be more functional, agentic, etc., where we do want to maintain oversight and sort of the human touch.
Well, I do plan on releasing my AI death metal album soon.
I was going to say this earlier. One of the fun ways in which I've reconciled myself to the AI music stuff. I don't listen to AI music, but in terms of weird metal forms, death metal, gent, stuff like that, where there's like very specific production.
We cannot tell anyone who thinks they can tell the difference is lying.
I like hearing it and trying to determine what the patties in the Big Mac are for them. Like, where did they arrive at? Like, okay, this is the right kind of blast beat. This is what our polyrhythm should be.
I think one of the reasons I think it's harder in those genres is because those musicians have been trying to sound like machines.
Yeah,
the drummers going back to. Oh my gosh, we're going to go down this rabbit hole. But the drummers, going back to the Swedish death metal guys, when you're supposed to sound like, and the humans, once the humans sound like a machine, it's really easy for a machine to sound like a human.
That's right.
And
that's right.
Here's my proof that those genres are in big, big trouble. I wonder if both of you know this. Are you familiar with the guys on Instagram who have the thing, Does It Riff? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh.
So for those of you who don't know, they're these two guys, and they grab requests, but they go to the grocery store essentially and hold up a tube of toothpaste with the barcode on it, and they take the numbers that are at the top of a barcode, and they have a very simple conversion. Anyone who plays guitar, they use that as tab. Okay, the only thing they're doing as musicians, as far as I know, is just adding rhythm to it. So then they go boom, 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 boom. A third or fourth item in the grocery store is a good riff. That's like some of them don't, but most of the time you're like, if someone released that album, that band would have fans. Colgate toothpaste gel sounds killer. That was my takeaway.
Incredible.
And what's that? That's not AI succeeding. That's a genre failing. Even though I listen to it all the time.
Jeez.
All right. Well, we have gone in a giant circle because we skipped all the music talk before I hit record. But I want to thank you, Brian, Scott. You've been great and hopefully illuminating. And I am going to welcome anyone who listens to ask us questions, especially because I think everyone in our space needs to be educated. And I just witnessed it. I just saw 50 pediatricians get an AI lecture, and the looks on their faces were scared. And we're here to help. So
thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Chip.
It was fun.
My pleasure. All right. Talk to you soon.